Short conversation with Swaruu of Erra, originally in Spanish.
What do you know about the Rosetta Stone?
That it is not accurate. Just because it is old does not mean it is accurate. It contains mistranslations that have caused problems, such as the translation of brothers, which is as in fili, which is affiliates or acquaintances, not siblings of genetics.
I wanted to show you a figure.
A Tesla tower, as you call it. But it is an artifact that represents the tower, not the tower itself. I can talk at length about that last image. For example, bottom left, it is a tractor beam being used to raise and lower the ship above. Top left, the introduction of agriculture, duality between Horus and Seth, or seeding grows, seeding dies. Above middle signifies absolute wisdom and the desire to share it with all. To the right and center below, solar god of Tiwanaku, access to the solar portal. On the right, Osiris with a long scepter of power, signifying that he holds wisdom in his hand because he represents a serpent. The solar god in Tiwanaku holds two birds that are two ships, as in Quetzalcoatl or feathered serpent. It looks like Anuxinamon and Tutankhamun. On the right, that's the entrance to the chamber of healing by sounds and frequencies. Short conversation with Yazhi.
Now there are many videos in English showing how to access the interior of the Sphinx through various entrances.
And what can you see inside? According to them, of course.
You can't see anything. They just say it doesn't go any further. And you can see that it does go deeper.
Of course, more follows.
All the way to the Domes of the Federation.
Yes, underneath the Giza plateau, there is a whole city. And not so far below. They just hide it vilely. It starts just a few meters below the ground.
It seems that they discovered that city in the early 1900s, and then they silenced it.
They made those false structures and temples, or they used real buildings and adored them as temples at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, to confuse the humans.
Why is it underground? Because of the climate?
It is customary to make extraterrestrial bases below, for many reasons. Protection. They are easier to do with tunnel boring machines. They get in the way less. They don't interfere with nature. Things like that.
I'd like to visit one of those bases.
They are even guarded by the military.
And no one's talking. No one's saying anything. They must be very well paid.
Well, because they don't see anything either.
Or maybe they're even clones.
Useful fools who do not see the damage they do to themselves with that attitude.
Yes, they just tell them to keep watch there, and that's it.
You say that many temples are false, and do you know which ones are false? I don't dare say I know them all, but I know most of them. It's that you don't need to know much. The mega structures, the big ones, like the pyramids and the temples of thousands of blocks and of great weight, yes, they are real, as well as minor, semi-buried structures of unimportant buildings. What is false is all those statues, ornaments with pillars, and over-decorated. If you are observant, There is a photo of Egyptian goats that are thousands of years old, but their legs have modern iron rod reinforcements, but internal. That is false. Or they can build a temple moving smaller or medium statues with cranes coming from other places, all to set up a theater. Genuine statues, but moved out of their original context just to assemble a scenario as what they want to represent, all to rewrite history. Questions from the public, July 2023.
We know there are two types of pyramids: the Mesoamerican, reptilian style, staircases, and the smooth Egyptian ones of the Federation. Is that so? My question is, were human sacrifices made in Egypt? I imagine not, but there are people out there who say that there were.
The pyramids and their different shapes are almost artistic reflections of the people who created them. But they all serve the same base function, and were all part of the same civilization and planetary energy grid. And no, there were no sacrifices in Egypt. But that's not to say that that didn't happen, as it still happens today. I am just saying that it wasn't part of what characterized that culture. And in Mesoamerica, sacrifices were a distortion or a misinterpretation of those cultures, let's say primitive ones, having seen surgical operations on the part of beings with advanced interstellar civilizations. But they are also distorted ways of pleasing the ones they see as their gods, and that we can understand as being highly of archon influence, or lower astral beings, who manipulate people to be fed with that kind of blood and human suffering in the form of lush.
So the Mesoamerican pyramids of Atlantis, where the reptilians were, there weren't sacrifices made there? Is that also a misinterpretation?
Some built before others, but all are part of the same system that had a planetary civilization. The sacrifices themselves are the misinterpretation. Even today, blood sacrifices are made. But in Egypt, they were not made, or the culture was not characterized as having sacrifices of that kind, contrary to what may be said elsewhere. That is not to say that they did not occur, but it is not something that defines that culture. However, in Mesoamerica, human sacrifices were performed regularly.
Thanks. And do you know anything about the Karnak temple in Egypt?
Yes, and it is complicated, so it is tremendously difficult to define what happened where and when. What you see there today is mostly artificially recreated. They have basically destroyed the true characteristics of the place to accommodate the ideas and concepts about Egypt to those of the late 19th century understanding, and, sadly, to promote tourism.
Okay, I'll share some images with you. See if you know what it is or what it means, considering everything has been vandalized. Why are the columns so tall?
What first comes to mind is the presence of some form of roof there that no longer exists, probably made of perishable materials such as wood, which itself is a material widely used in Egypt, and which seems quite ignored by modern Egyptologists.
But they're tall because it was a special building? Something religious?
Yes, tall constructions are as for public buildings and temples, or wherever it is desired to impose the idea of grandeur.
Okay, thanks. What does this image mean? Behind it, there's a room with 7 keys. This is the front.
Portal presence. Interdimensional portal opening site.
So that's a portal. Why 7 doors and 7 keys behind them?
Because of the logical implication that you need 7 keys to open all 7 doors. It is technology. What is left in stone is not the technology. It is a marker that has survived and indicates where the portal is applied. It is an entrance to secure sites or multiple destinations. 1 door for each pre-programmed destination in the portal.
And it worked like any portal, matching the origin and destination frequencies?
That's right. Every portal works on the same principle, no matter who made it. Basically, the reverse of a spacecraft engine.
So you're saying that the portal had 7 pre-programmed destinations, and in that case, who wanted to reach the temple of Karnak?
Yes, either that, or progressively more keys were needed to enter the desired destination, which means it is a progression of security levels. The more keys, the more secure the places. This can also be interpreted from a more matrix point of view as being the 7 levels of the underworld. And it could also be related to the 7 levels of the intraterrestrial reptilian society. But being Egypt, they did not dominate the region. I only mention it.
Or the 7 stars of Pleiades? Or is that too much speculation?
Exactly.
That's the knowledge that comes from the Pleiades, right?
Yes, as snakes, knowledge, yes. However, there are also 7 levels of today's reptilian society.
That has nothing to do with the regressive reptilians, right?
That's right, it's not necessarily related, but it does coincide. But I do wonder if they didn't start using those representations of wisdom in the form of a serpent because of reptilian influence on Earth.
But why was a snake chosen to represent knowledge? Did reptilian society appropriate that symbolism? Or it has nothing to do with it?
It is possible that it does have a reptilian influence, however I do not have specific information about it. Just that the association that has nothing to do with the reptiles is snake DNA. Only because the snake is a reptile, but that is circumstantial.
So in Adam and Eve, the Adams are one kind and the Eves are the Taigetans who give knowledge. We've already explained that, but it's Eve who takes the apple. But what does the snake have to do with it? Does it only represent knowledge?
Yes, in that case, I interpret the serpent more as the knowledge that comes from understanding DNA, which is not only because of biology, but because of all that it implies: ancestor knowledge, manipulation, and even superior technology. But it is easy to interpret that serpent as the reptilians offering Eve the wisdom that later expelled them from the Garden of Eden. And, in a not-so-rigid way, it is valid to interpret it as the reptilians' fault.
It's the reptilians' fault that they haven't given knowledge, since it's Eve who has the apple in her hand, not the serpent in its mouth.
Yes, in fact, because they are invasive and highly aggressive and abusive. Also because Eve has dominion over DNA, as it is the woman who procreates. Okay, thank you. About the ram sphinxes, what does that mean? Sagittarius? It means the general worship of the time of Aries. Is there any race in the Federation that is from that area of Aries, or is it just astrology? Countless. However, here it is astrology, yes.